Well, good evening as everyone's logging on. I'm going to share my screen, get us up and going. Let's see. Welcome. I keep wanting to try and figure out how to play music during this period, right? I almost like need to just hold up a speaker or something, so it's not that awkward silence while we're all joining and hanging out together for the evening. But well, let's see, I can share. I'm going to start this. That's cute that I act like I know how to start my slideshow. There we go. No, that didn't work. From beginning. Oh, good tip. Thank you. From beginning. There we go. It's always a good place to start, the beginning. Well, welcome everyone. As people are continuing to log on, I'll go ahead and just get us started. I am Leanne, and I run the Family Resource Center. I'm also the district liaison for special education. So I'm very excited about tonight's presentation. And I've had the privilege of getting to have the sneak peek at what these intelligent and wonderful ladies are going to present. And as a, looking at it through my mommy lens, it is just so clear. And I really hope it helps you start to think about, what do I need to know as my kiddo is getting older? Because I will be the first one to admit that I thought I had it figured out because, I was an experienced IEP mom. And then after high school hit, I had nothing figured out. None of it was what I thought it was going to be. And so I love getting to support families and help them have a shorter learning curve than I had. So housekeeping. We are in webinar mode. That means that your video is off and your mics are muted, so you don't have to worry about if we're watching you snack or do the dishes. You're all good, be comfy. Chat. So we're going to use the chat to, if you want to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, if you're a parent or a professional. We would love that, or if you want to communicate with each other. But for questions, during the presentation, as we go along, there is a Q&A feature. You'll see that little symbol. It says Q&A on the bottom of your screen. Please use that feature to help us capture all of the questions. We're going to let Shannon and Katie go along with their presentation, and then they have a point where we're going to pause and go through those questions. So please make sure, if you want your question answered, put it in that Q&A so we don't miss it. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available on the FRC YouTube channel. They're closed captioning if you need that. That is on the bottom of the screen. When tonight's session ends, you will see on your screen pop up a link to the survey. Please take a moment to fill that out because your feedback's important. We want to know if this training is meeting your needs and also if you have any suggestions. That being said, don't stress that you feel like you have to copy this all down, okay? Tomorrow, you will get an email from me that's going to include all this information as well. It will have the link to the handouts. It'll have your certificate of attendance, the link to the recording, everything you need that was available from tonight, okay? So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to these ladies. We've got Shannon and Katie from our ATP program with Clovis Unified.
Welcome. We're so excited to be here presenting this really important journey that you are embarking upon or are already deep in. And we recognize it is a journey for sure. My name is Katie Shea, and I am the program specialist for the Clovis Unified Adult Transition Program. I also am over our Workability and Transition Partnership Program grant. And my co-presenter here, I'm going to have you introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Shannon Jorgensen. I'm the teacher on special assignment over Workability and Transition Partnership Program, also known as TPP.
So our topic this evening is all about planning for the future and the journey that you are on, and preparing for life after high school with a student with a disability.
Okay, so what you can expect to learn in our training today is this is a visual aid to show you the process of a student who has an IEP. You're going to learn how the IEP process supports our students as they transition to adulthood with their individual transition plan, ITP, age of majority, and completing high school. We're also going to learn about resources that can be accessed, and we're going to learn about how families can help their student throughout this process. We're also going to learn how our students have navigated the challenges on the road to adulthood, and then also learn about the different student and parent perspectives surrounding the topic of transition.
Okay, so we're going to start on our journey talking about the individual transition plan and the development of this plan. So the ITP, or the individual transition plan, it becomes a part that is required of the student's IEP. And this happens as of age 16. The ITP is to support the student in developing post-secondary goals, and that is based on the student's strengths, preferences, and interests. The ITP will include the gathering of information. This might be done through informal or formal means, such as student interviews, questionnaires, a parent interview. And the themes on this particular section of the IEP are surrounding education and training, employment, and then independent living as applicable for that specific student. Additionally, the transition services that are required for the student to help support them in meeting their goals or making steps towards meeting their goals will also be in this ITP. And then the team will provide a wide range of input as appropriate, specific to what transition services are needed, and then some post-secondary options, which is life after high school.
Okay, so now we're looking at an example of what an ITP may look like for a non-diploma student versus a student earning their diploma. So as you can see under education, the post-secondary education goal for a non-diploma student would be possibly to go to Clovis Adult Transition Program, while a student earning their diploma would be going to Clovis Community College to earn an AA. Under employment, they may have the same post-secondary goal of getting a part-time job. And then under independent living, the post-secondary independent goal for a non-diploma student may be to get around the community by taking public transportation, while a student that earns a diploma might be getting their driver's license. The main thing to understand is that all will vary depending on the student. This is just a roadmap that is specific to the student's post-secondary needs. So on here, these are some activities that can support your students' preferences and are activities completed at school, okay? These support their post-secondary goals. So for example, let's say your student loves being outdoors, and some possible activities may include gardening. A possible work site could be at a nursery, or could possibly be assisting a CUSD grounds keeper. And let's say your student, a possible recreation and leisure skill could be to visit a nursery or interview that same CUSD ground employee. Let's say your student enjoys pushing things around, or some activities may include shopping or cleaning. A possible work site could be at a grocery store. And a possible recreation and leisure skill could be maybe going to the mall or to the gym. These are just examples, and of course, these will all be different and according to your students' needs.
So why do we have an ITP, or an individual transition plan? And why is the ITP legally required? So the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, it added a transition component with the purpose to prepare our students with disabilities for adulthood and in thinking about life after high school. Transition was identified as a priority for students with disabilities. The Office of Special Education and Opportunities Act and the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act were also part of making the ITP a required component of the IEP. So the legal requirements of an ITP, there are a few of them. One is it must contain age-appropriate assessments, both informal or formal, and the point is to capture what the student wants for their life. Specific to what do they want for their life as it relates to education, what do they want for possible employment or training, and if applicable, the independent living goal. Another component is really for that IEP team in the context of the IEP team meeting to really facilitate conversation and linkage to outside agencies that may be part of what the individual student requires after they leave high school and into adulthood. Pictured here is actually what the individual transition plan looks like. And as you can see, these numbered sections on this plan that are highlighted, they represent all of the individual transition plan components, but it's within the context of the transition plan. So we have post-secondary goals. They are numbered here. There are goals regarding education and training, employment, and independent living. This plan is updated annually as part of the plan review IEP meeting. There is a section where all of the information, such as the informal and formal assessments that were used to capture what it is that the student wants for their future. There's a section here that shows what transition services and where that goes as it relates to each of the identified goal areas. There's also a section regarding the transition service that the student would require in order to make steps towards achieving their goals. The student being a participant in the development of this plan is a required component. In addition, their level of participation in this process is a component, an important one. And then seeing if a outside agency or efforts to involve or invite an outside agency to be part of the meeting is also a component.
Okay, so here we're going to hear from a student. Her name is Addison, and her personal perspective of what an ITP is and an explanation of her personal ITP.
Hi, my name is Addison Bajurga. I'm 19 years old. It's kind of like the map to help me with my future. My educational employment goal was to work at Safemart. Last time I didn't get hired last time because they weren't hiring. Calling them to follow up to see if I would get the job.
And how long did that take?
For a few months.
So how many times do you think you actually called them?
I called them once a week. My independent goal is to get my driver license by spring. I have 3 times and then I failed 3 times.
So what are you doing in the meantime to get around town?
I take Clovis Transit Roundup.
What is that?
is a bus where they can take you anywhere, but you have to call in for appointment. Or you can also use the app.
Okay, so just a little update on Addison. In this video, when we recorded it, she was still trying to get her job at St. Martin. She has currently employed at St. Martin, has been employed for a year, so that's really exciting. So just wanted to give you an update on that. So how can families help? The main idea of an ITP is the roadmap for their future after they leave their school. So I like to have families trying to think even further ahead. And let's think of our students at 40 years old, okay? So let's think about where they are at 40 years old. Are they living on their own, or are they in a supported environment? Are they working? Where are you going to be at 40 years when they are 40 years old? Are you going to be able to support them? Or do you need help to support them? This is something a lot of families have a hard time thinking about, but it is something that's important to think about. And then also, what would you hope and want for your student at the age of 40? Most of us, I think, want as much independence as possible to make life-changing transitions while they still have your support. It's easier for your student to handle moving away from home when they still have your support to go through that transition. And then what can you do now to get them there? Encourage your student to engage in activities that encourage independence. Working is one. Getting around the community on their own. That could be using Handy Writer Roundup. Taking on responsibilities at home. Daily responsibilities are key in getting your students to have that independence to be able to live independently as possible.
Okay, now on our journey, we come to something called the age of majority. This is when your student becomes a legal adult, and in California, that is 18 years of age. And this law requires that students be informed of their educational rights no later rather than a year prior to them reaching the age of majority at 18. So this is something that takes place in your student's IEP, and it's, when they're 17, within that window prior to turning 18. At this point, all educational rights under IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, those rights will transfer from the parent who assumes the educational rights for the student as a minor. They transfer on over to the adult student when they reach this age. Students who reach the age of majority assume that responsibility, and they also assume their role as a member of their IEP team in making decisions about their education from that point moving forward. There are some exceptions to this, and that includes parents providing legal documentation in cases where the student may be conserved or have a limited conservatorship. So I think when we talk about this, the most detriment part to it all is, so what can parents do to support their student now, knowing this is ahead? The best way to do that is to include and involve your student in their IEP meeting as early as you feel is appropriate. And I say now. I say for elementary, there can be components of the IEP meeting that are very appropriate for them to start to participate in. And also, we have a really great example on the next slide where we have a student who's a high school student, and they are participating in their IEP meeting. And it really supports their understanding. It supports their understanding of what is to come with their level of knowledge about making decisions, educationally speaking. And it helps them to grow in the area of independence and prepare for this age of majority.
Hi, name is Andrea. and he is so I'm 16 years old, and my birthday is May 12th. I live in house with Jacqueline and Dad and my parents and Grandma and Juanita. I like to learn about making a salad. And I lead a meeting with and Mrs. Taylor, and I will take turns in talking about everything I learned.
Okay, so I think that's such a great example of an appropriate level of participation. And, this is our student where she was sharing part of the present levels of performance. That's a big part of the IEP, and participating in that process. Okay, so what else happens at the age of 18? So educational records requests, which is, requesting the ability to access records. It has to be made by the student at that point because they are the educational rights holder. In terms of medical, at this stage, when turning 18, the adult student at that point maintains their medical decision-making. And there are some HIPAA laws that prohibit others from involving themselves in medical matters. And there are some privacy protections with that. That might be medical records and or accessing those, as well as decisions and consultation that happens with medical providers between the adult student and medical providers. In the topic of insurance, there could be eligibility changes at 18 for your student and what's covered under your policy. That could come with some change when they turn 18. As far as financial goes, their financial records become their financial records and are private at that point. The student is also able to enter into any binding contracts as an 18-year-old, whether that be real estate, credit cards, wills, and trusts. Liability comes with that. They assume responsibility as the adult. And registering to vote is another thing that happens upon the age of 18. They are able to vote upon registering in federal, state, and local elections. And for our male students that are 18, under the military selective service, the adult at the age of 18 will need to register. And this includes our students with a disability.
Okay, so how can families help in this process? When a student's reaching age of majority, an adult, we want to give them as independent as possible. So just simple things like chores at home, getting them ready to learn how to take care of a home. What is expected of adults that own homes? Start off small, just making your bed and picking out your own clothes, your own outfit for the day, and then move on from there. Have students advocate for themselves. This is extremely important. Understand the importance of your student attending their IEP. As Katie's already touched on this, and we're going to be probably bringing this up a couple more times because this we feel is very, very important. And then based on your students' needs and abilities for them to be independent outside of their home, consider consulting with outside agencies and or seeking legal guidance on the topic of conservatorship and alternatives to conservatorship. And plan ahead in preparation for your student before they reach the age of 18. Don't wait until they reach 18. Start planning years in advance. Another important thing is open up a bank account of their own, all right? And in order to do that, you're going to need a California ID, all right? They do not need to have their driver's license, but they could get a California ID. Help them open up their own bank account. And then also have them get in touch with Social Security Administration. And under this, they will be able to get their Social Security card if they've lost it. Also, for students that are responsible and able to keep track of their own personal items, It's good for them to have a copy of their own Social Security card. We have had parents in the past have a copy of one, and then also the student get their own copy. You can get more than one copy. And then also, this is also a place where if they do get Social Security income, SSI, they will need to reapply again when they're 18. So if your student already receives SSI, just know that when they turn 18, age of majority, they're going to have to reapply for SSI. All right, so what are the key takeaways for age of majority? Well, the one thing is, it is a component of the IEP, as we know. I'm so sorry, I just lost my place. It is a component of the IEP, and we will be talking about this throughout the IEP, but in the part of the ITP section of your student's IEP. This is an opportunity to ask questions about what will occur a minimum of 2 times in the context of the IEP prior to your student turning 18. And I'm going to show you an example on the next slide. This is also a part of your ITP is a question regarding, is the student conserved at the age of 18 or not? And this is embedded as part of the IEP as well. And then all rights transfer from the parent to the student, and the student now is the educational rights holder. This means that they now sign the meeting notice and approve or decline the IEP. Students are still encouraged to invite their advocates, meaning parents or whoever they normally had at their IEP meetings. And all procedure safeguards are now explained and summarized to the student in the context of IEP meetings. So consent on the IEP, request for educational records, registration, and attendance in school, plus communication is all done with the adult student. Here's the example of the second page as the ITP. As you can see, what is circled in red is where the student is explained the age of majority on or before the 17th birthday. So now we're going to watch a video about a student. Her name is Haley, and her sharing what she believes is the age of majority and what it means to her.
I feel like you're just like becoming into adulthood where you have to have all these responsibilities, have to get the bills paid, have to make sure like even if you have a job already, you can continue that job. And then it's just like saying like you're free, like you're not under your parents' roof anymore. Or if you are, you're just more of an adult and saying like, Mom, can we do this? And it's like, well, you can do it because you're already 18 and over. And yeah.
I love the way she explains that you're not under your parents' finger anymore. All right. Okay, so preparing your student before they reach the age of majority. There are some restrictions and limitations. You want to learn about your options. So some places you can turn to is Disability Rights California and other support agencies. You can get a power of attorney or conservatorship or limited conservatorship. You want to help your student to assume oversight and management of their own health needs. So teach them to manage their own medication, make their own medical appointments, have them actually call the doctor and request an appointment. Write a script if you need to, have them practice doing that for themselves. Early on, encourage and foster self-advocacy. Have them call businesses, have them, tell the teacher something that you want the teacher to know and have them relay the message back to you. I did this with my own daughter. I had her, she hated me on the phone. She did not like to call or talk to other people. And so I had her order pizza for the family. If we wanted pizza the night, she was going to be the one that has to order it. Just getting them out of that comfort zone and practicing those things that we don't really think about often that are very important for them to know. Also, they need to find out about their disabilities. So encourage the students to understand what are their strengths and weaknesses. Understand how their disability might affect them in future employment or in career choices. Have some realistic conversations in regards to this. And then I had a student that wanted to be a veterinarian. However, she was unable to earn her high school diploma. So we had to have a realistic conversation about her disability and how it affects her ability to earn a diploma. So then we came up with some alternative careers that were attainable. So you just want to make sure you have those conversations with your student and their IEP team. And then also actively participate in all transition related meetings, IEPs, 504s, anything that they have. Make sure that they have current documentation and develop an information system with all their information in there. This can be a folder, this could be a drawer. Just make sure that they have documentation and understand the importance of keeping it safe. Sorry. Okay, so
And
now
now-
it's time.
Sorry, question and answer session if there's been any that have been added, Leanne.
There have been, and I appreciate all that information you've shared so far. Again, there's so much about that might be surprising to families. I know even as simple as when your child turns 18, and even though they're still on your health insurance plan, and nobody cares what their disability is. And I don't mean they don't care, but I mean, the law says, right, they're 18. So unless you have that legal authority to access their records, even to, I remember getting let's say a dentist bill and calling the office and be like, oh, no, this is incorrect. And they're saying, sorry, Mrs. Keeler, we can't speak to you. And I thought to myself, what are you talking about? You can't speak to me. I'm paying the bill. But just all those changes that, and especially, I mean, that's a difficult transition for families if your child is typical. But when you have a child with a disability, no matter how, significant that disability is, or like you mentioned too, if there are health issues involved and managing all of that, we as parents, have been their case managers all this time. And so that it is important to, one, what I heard from you is to start early on self-advocacy. And again, that is going to look different for every kiddo, right? And what their ability is. That may be, and I remember you mentioning at CAC, Katie, that may be them pointing to a picture of something that they prefer. Whatever that ability of them to be able to participate, it's important to, help them learn to have that voice. Also, because for kiddos maybe that might be on the end of going to junior college, maybe they're not going to ATP, but they have a disability and they're going to need support, those self-advocacy skills are going to be even more crucial, right? Because you get to college and there's not going to be that teacher check-in. How are you doing, Betty? What can I do to support you? If you aren't advocating for yourself, it's not going to, be there. And so I love all your tips. So let's go down these questions. There were a couple about 504 plans. Does this only apply to students on an IEP? And I think that's a mixed answer, right? Yes and no. I mean, the ITP, well, I'll let you answer, but so it twofold. One is the ATP program only available to students with an IEP, but then the bigger picture is, do children with 504 plans have changes at adult as well?
Oh, that's a great question. So regarding students with 504s and whether or not they're able to go to the adult transition program, I think is one of the questions I heard you say.
Right.
You have to have an IEP that would allow you to have that continued placement in special education, which is the best way to describe what the adult transition program is. It's continued special education services for adults who are not able to, earn their regular high school diploma at the conclusion of that 4 years. So that's one piece. There is not a individual transition plan component in a Section 504 plan. However, what absolutely applies for a student with a 504 plan is those accommodations that are needed. And those apply beyond high school because under the American with Disabilities Act, which is where our community colleges and the rest of the world, it's a as asked and if reasonable, and there's processes in which to determine if the request for an accommodation is reasonable. It varies, but again, it's all under ADA, which is how the rest of the world operates outside of the point in time where you may have an IEP, or if you happen to have one. I hope that helps.
Yes, it did. So, and like we referenced too, many of these things, like the age of majority, right? I mean, when your child with a 504 plan too turns 18, there are going to be lots of changes. And so those things are very similar, right? For any kiddo. So here's a question. I think we already tackled this, but what if your child's autistic with an intellectual disability, along with limited verbal ability? What does that look like for them, for their participation? And I think we addressed that. You're going to meet them where they're at. Right.
And the assessment gathering process to try to understand what it is that the student wants for themselves and that sort of thing. I think it most certainly, we have picture inventories, all sorts of different assessment tools, informal and formal, that help us gauge, what it is that a student prefers for themselves. And we would also, in a situation that you're describing with a student with limited communication skills or limited verbal skills, we certainly would work and connect with the parents and interview them as part of the information gathering when designing the ITP. Shannon, in a previous slide tonight, shared, a goal for a student that is based on a preference or an interest might be pushing things, right? That we also might see a student who is interested in, making sure tables are clean, and that is something they really, want. They would even work for it. Like they would be willing to do an academic or instructional task in order to clean a table because they love doing that. That's a preference. That's a very clear preference. So that might be for a student who has limited or nonverbal communication skills. So there are lots of ways for us to obtain that information in working with our students, all students, and a range of needs.
Thank you. And I think too, that's where that component of collaborating with your team, right? This isn't a one and done. You've got this one opportunity to develop it, and then that's it. That's going to be the trajectory, right? I mean, it's a part of that IEP, and it's a living, breathing document. This is a good question too. If a child is conserved, how does that change the ITP? And how do we collaborate to work towards more independence with conservatorship?
Gosh, I love that question.
Me too.
Shannon, would you like to answer that question and I'll add anything to it?
Sure.
I'm taking all
So
the
ITP is still focused on the student and what the student wants after they leave their program. So we would still have that student focused. The parents, if they are conserved, that will definitely be discussed and reviewed in the IEP, but it's still going to be driven by what the student is capable and what the student wants. So it shouldn't change at all for conservatorship. The only thing that will change is the reviewing of it in their IEP as an IEP member.
I would just add, the parent interview, I think, would become more of a standard component in that type of scenario. We do have, different students that are conserved that do have some verbal and some communication, and yet, they're not able, as deemed by the court, to make their own educational rights or other like their medical decisions and things of that nature, depending on the conservatorship. But But yes, the consent to the IEP, the consent to an assessment plan, those kinds of things would be the things that would change. And the procedural safeguards for a student who is under a conservatorship, they are the conservator's rights. So in this case, if it's a parent who has the conservatorship over their adult student, that parent maintains, those are their procedural safeguards.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to do one more question, and then I think I'll hold the rest there because there's a couple more after that, but I'll hold them until the end, if that's all right. So we can keep going. So this last question, and it's funny, I wrote this down as well, is how do families know what outside agencies to invite to the IEP? And who's going to suggest that? Like, will the school district give them a heads up prior to that ITP? Or, I mean, how are they supposed to know who should be there?
Ooh, that's such a great question. So, agency linkage is a required component of the ITP, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are attending the IEP. It may mean we work with the student as part of their class. Maybe there's a goal on the ITP early on that helps them build their knowledge through researching as part of their learning activities and visiting some of the outside local agencies. There are so many great ones that we have. I know EPU, Resources for Independence, Central Valley Regional Center is amazing. Again, these are I just gave tiny few examples because there are so many. But certainly, you know, we have longstanding relationships. Some of our families do with having certain agencies as part of their students' educational journey. There's a section actually on the educational settings page of the IEP that specifically speaks to, you know, what outside agencies are involved. And, you know, this is every year this gets updated. So some of our families who have CCS or Central Valley Regional Center, and as well as many others, that section is how that gets updated. We have some families that, you know, don't have so much communication with Central Valley Regional Center and the case coordinator for their student while they're school age. And that's supposed to be that way. That's not because they're trying to create distance or anything like that. That's just the nature of how it works. However, they become such an integral part in helping us in supporting your adult as they get ready on the other end to exit the public education system when they reach maximum age of eligibility, which is at age 22. I don't know if I missed anything, Shannon, that you would want to add to that, or Leanne.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, and also just parents, if you have agencies that you want at the IEP meeting, you have that right to invite them. You and the student can invite whoever they want to those IEP meetings.
Right. Thank you, Shannon. That's what I was just going to suggest too, is, you know, is as a parent, think about, you know, again, you could ask your IEP team, right? Say, hey, I know we're getting ready for this. Who do you think I should invite? Because again, as families, some are much more experienced as navigating all those acronyms, you know, but they're right. And so I'm sure your case manager would be more than happy to help you navigate that as well and say, oh, I noticed that your child's a regional center client, or and offer those suggestions so you could invite those people ahead of time. Okay, I'm gonna let you ladies get started again then, and we'll save the next couple for afterwards, okay?
Great. Okay, so next stop on our transition road map here is approaching the end of high school. So we talked a little bit at the very beginning that part of the outcomes of this training will include you know, the different paths, one that results in a diploma and then one that results in something called a certificate of completion or a non-diploma. This is telling us all about what is a certificate of completion. In a few slides from now, you're going to get a really interesting student perspective on what their take is on what this is. But it is definitively not a high school diploma. And it's important to just understand that that's what it is. It's not a diploma. So who is this for? What student population? It is for only special education students, as it's determined appropriate for that student by the IEP team. And it is obtained at the completion of the student's 4-year high school program. And this is an appropriate sort of path for individual students who don't really have an access point for those grade level standards based instruction. And this is in cases where students might not be able to meet those required high school diploma requirements. And it's just based on what the student's needs are. With the certificate of completion, the student is eligible to receive a free and appropriate public education. We call this a FAPE. So they're able to have their IEP and all the services that they have in their IEP post high school. And so that allows them to continue to be eligible to receive those special education services. And that is done in our district-wide adult transition program, which is 18 to 22 years. You will hear about the topic of a diploma or a non-diploma or certificate of completion at least annually in your student's IEP. And you'll even start to hear this topic come up early on, even in elementary school, as you talk about the needs of your student, the goals, and what is the least restrictive environment with which those goals can be addressed. And when we look at the least restrictive environment, we are looking at being able to address needs in potentially the general ed class, and only if necessary, we look to remove a student into a special education class for a period or for part of time if there isn't a point of access or they're not able to make progress on goals. Okay, so students that have obtained their certificate of completion upon their 4 years of high school and completing that, they come on over to the Adult Transition Program. So this is that continuation of special education services for students that are 18 to 22 years of age. There's an emphasis on development of skills to increase their ability to participate.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, did we lose Katie?
I think we lost Katie.
Okay.
Okay, I will continue. Let's see.
Sure.
Do you see her on the screen?
No, I do not.
Okay. So this is the Adult Transition Program. You earn your certificate of completion. There are 4 domains that we focus on, and that is self-advocacy, personal social, daily living and independent living, community access, and vocational. Learning activities take place within the ATP classrooms and within community settings where we are teaching our students how to access and use local community resources. So on this next slide, you're going to see a video of a day in the life at ATP. This is something that we put together, and you're going to see different varying classrooms and students and just kind of some ideas of what we do at ATP.
Good morning, Ada.
So that's a video that we have, which is just shows some things that they do, our students do throughout the day. This next slide is different perspectives, student perspectives on what a certificate of completion is. Very different perspectives, very interesting, and we'll talk about this after we watch them.
Okay, so certificate of completion is like when you when you graduate from high school, it's just like a regular one of your grades.
Okay.
I think it's like related to grades.
Okay.
And like if you give a C, you can still.
Okay, and the next one.
Is where you completed like some of school, like in high school, but didn't get your diploma yet. So when you get the credits to go in the high school diploma classes, then you can start that. And
So as you can see, after these two videos, both of these students have earned their certificate of completion, yet they're still confusing to the student and families. So it's really important for families and students need to review what a certificate of completion is and what it means to the student. That it is not a high school diploma, it is different, and it needs to be explained prior to leaving high school.
That's such a good point, Shannon. And one of the things I think is hard too for families is that those conversations about diploma track versus non-diploma track,
Yeah,
really you're talking junior high when
absolutely.
that trajectory starts, right?
Mhm.
And
Yes,
so that's
usually
why
it does.
I'm always encouraging families. Sometimes families, when I send out flyers, like it's never too early to start thinking about this, okay? Because it's not a one session and we're gonna be experts on this, right? But
Right.
hopefully what this does is start to lay that groundwork and start to help families know what questions they have and compile it and start having these conversations with their teams.
Exactly.
So, hi, Katie, you're back.
I am so sorry.
That's okay. I love all these.
It actually worked out fine,
glitches.
and they're mostly my slides, so we're all good.
We're all
another
forgiving here.
Another thing we want to talk about is when you earn your certificate of completion and you end up going to the Adult Transition Program, which we call Clovis ATP, one of the things we focus on are strengthening students' vocational skills. This is where students may have the opportunity to gain work experience at one of our many community agencies that we partner with. Some of them are, like in this picture, they are working for CUSD Technology. They are taking apart salvage computers for CUSD Technology. Another one we have are either CVS or Joann's working at the store. We also have Easy Errands where they go around and they're personal shoppers for employees. We have students working at Vaughn's. This is a student that worked in the bakery. Another group goes to Certus CrossFit Gym and they do some maintenance and cleaning at that gym. We also have a relationship with our CSD Transportation with the Parts in the Yards program. We also have students going around and taking orders for the Cracked Mug, which is our bistro that we have at Clovis Adult School. We also have a Building Bridges print shop, an ATP mail courier, and we also do recycling, amongst other things. So what are some other things to consider after your student completes 4 years at high school? Well, some students don't want to continue education post-high school, and that is okay. They may want to enroll in personal enrichment courses or training such as carpentry, mechanics, beauty school, and so on. Others also might seek out assistance from community agencies. Some popular community agencies that our students reach out to is Department of Rehabilitation, which we call the DOR. Clovis Unified has the Transition Partnership Program that is a bridge between Clovis Unified, and Department of Rehab that helps with getting jobs and job experience. Also, another agency is the Social Security Administration, Workforce Connection, and California Conservation Corps, and College to Careers. These are just some examples of different agencies. And of course, CVRC is a good one too, if you qualify. Recreation and leisure activities, some places that you can get in touch with is Break the Barriers, Special Olympics, your local gym is another one. Access community transportation. This is huge and has opened up so much independence for some of our students. Taking a city bus. And for those students that are unable to independently take the city bus, there's a Roundup and Handy Ride, which is a door-to-door service. Definitely look into that. It's wonderful. If you have any questions, you can always email me, and I've done a lot of these with my students. And then it's also important to understand that any eligible, which means under age 22 adult student that got their certificate of completion can at any time re-enroll at CUSD to attend ATP at any point. So let's say a student got their certificate of completion, they exit high school, they decide, I don't want to go to ATP. They don't have to, but then a year goes by and they're bored and they want to do something and they realize, okay, I need help. They can come back at any point until they're 22, they have services.
And all they need to do is just go to the professional development building and make or call the general number in our special education department. It's really quite simple, and make an appointment to do registration and enrollment with staff in the PDB, which is the professional development building. They'll assist you, and that'll be the entry point to getting the adult or supporting the adult student to get back into the adult transition program, or start if maybe they didn't start at the point when they were eligible to. That is not uncommon at all. We do have some adult students that just need a little bit of a break, and sometimes they need a couple of different breaks throughout that window of time, and that's not too uncommon. Of course, if we had it our way, they would be with us the entire time that they're eligible, but certainly you know, we honor the decision that the adult student makes in conjunction with their network of support, their family or other supports.
Katie, I think that's so important that you brought that up, because I know as I work with families, you know, birth to 22, that is another change. And I think Shannon mentioned it earlier, that parents can't make a student attend this anymore, right? This is a choice. And so no matter, again, what their level of disability is, it is still, no one's going to force them to attend this. And so that's a big, you know, that can be cumbersome for families, right? Well, what do they need to do this? This is good for them. I'm the mama, I know, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's difficult. Another suggestion that I'd like to make too is when you think about other things to consider is again, as parents, right? You're the expert on your child and what their needs are, and as they're becoming an adult, but you know, really connecting with other families. Again, this is such a broad topic. And so we could be talking about a student who maybe has no cognitive impairments, but maybe blind. And, you know, so they have a disability, right? And they're going to go to college. How are they going to navigate that? How are they going to navigate life? To our severely medically fragile students, and what does that look like, and everything in between. So just, you know, your child having a disability, that can be very, very broad. And so I always like to suggest to families, get connected with you know, your circle of support, families who have been there, who and done that, right? Who may have a child similar to yours, you know, like for instance, the Down Syndrome Association is a great organization. But there are lots of support groups, even if your child maybe has a rare illness, right? There's so much available online now to brainstorm with other, you know, mamas maybe and daddies, or, you know, caregivers. that maybe have already navigated this with those particular set of challenges, and what did they do, and just get that support. I highly encourage that, because it can feel isolating, and lonely, and how do I do this? So there you go.
Thank you, Leanne.
Sure.
Well, what a perfect segue into what our parent feedback as it relates to what's their perspective on this transition road, this journey that their student is on. And absolutely, it comes with fears, and the anticipation of change is sometimes scary. And part of our vision statement at the Adult Transition Program is to meet our families where they are in their journey of helping their students, and all of those stories that come with that, those important stories that are part of learning about our student and their family. So one of the things our families have been so open with sharing is how scary it is to build trust with a new team or a new site. I know we used to see this also when students were much younger in elementary, going from one school site where they're a Bearcat, and then transitioning over to a brand new school site where they're all of a sudden going to be a TK Trojan or something like that, and establishing trusting, okay, they're going to keep things safe for my student, or I know to anticipate this type of communication because it's part of the school-wide communication system. So the building trust comes up again and again, and I know it comes with some fear about the future. Sometimes there's some communication challenges that come up, especially when a student with limited communication skills, or if they use a communication device. Transitions are really hard, and this just further compounds that sometimes as we're trying to get to know the student and know their communication system, and all the things that we can do to firmly request or firmly prompt them to make requests with their device versus letting less challenging ways for them to communicate those requests. So yeah, those take some time, and we understand that can be really challenging for parents to see and experience. I mentioned earlier that meeting parents where they are in their journey, but sometimes that comes with a lot of emotion, because it can bring up some experiences in the past that maybe weren't positive. And so some additional parent perspectives that have come up is concerns about the transition to whatever the new school site, or a new teacher. Maybe they've had a teacher for 6 years in a row, and that is where the student did the most progress over years. And then a change with that comes fear and worry, safety concerns, curriculum, regression, all of those kinds of things come up. Sometimes transportation becomes much longer, or thinking about, oh, so my student with a disability rides the regular education bus. However, that doesn't exist anymore, but they still need to get to whatever location they're getting to. So again, the range of needs is, again, transition is scary. And at this particular stage in the transition journey, all of these things come up, and it really depends on your students' needs, but it's kind of a pervasive thing. Yeah, even with our more independent students, things like this do come up, believe it or not. Power of attorney, and then the re-emergence of past behaviors. Those things are definitely part of the parent perspective.
Okay, so how can families help in this process, this transition? Well, first of all, encourage any eligible student to attend Clovis Adult Transition Program on a regular and consistent basis. As we talked before, yes, it is their choice. They're 18 or older. They don't have to go, but we still encourage and we want the parents to encourage them to receive the services that are offered to them. Work experience is huge. This is something that we do focus on at the adult program, but also you could do this on your own. If you have your own business, that could be a work experience. Volunteer experience at church, working in the nursery, or working at an animal shelter. These places welcome volunteers. And so encourage your student to do that. Encourage them to try to gain that in work experience to build up that resume. We said this before, make sure your student has a California ID. It's needed for work and to open up a bank account. And it leads on to have your student open up their own bank account. This is a step toward independence. Also, facilitate and build connections with community agencies. Some common ones that we see students connected to is Department of Rehab, Central Valley Regional Center, and the Social Security Administration Office.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the high school diploma, and that being what the student with a disability earns at the conclusion of the 4 years of high school. It is definitely the intended outcome that we would want for any and all students at the conclusion of their 4-year high school program. For the purpose of this training, we are talking about it being obtained at the conclusion of high school, okay? And it is a student who is able to meet those requirements that are at the state, and then our school district has set forth as far as what the graduation requirements are for the high school diploma specifically. This is typically a student who has the ability to access those grade level standards classes, the instruction, but perhaps has support from the resource specialist program, or it is a student who requires a special education class, but there's close alignment to the grade level standards. That might be, through our ACE classes, which is a high school diploma earning path. And this is our students who are able to get at the conclusion of their high school education, the necessary credits. And as I said earlier, the meeting of the requirements. A high school diploma is often needed for employment, future employment, not always, but is very helpful with that. And a high school diploma is needed in order to earn higher level of degrees at a college level.
Okay, so what happens after high school diploma? Well, a student exits from special education. So once they get their high school diploma, they no longer have an IEP. Another thing they could do is obtain employment. Exception is earning a high school diploma via alternative pathway to a diploma. Another thing that can happen after high school is someone could get a job. They can obtain employment. They can enroll in college or enroll in a trade school like welding, electrician, or a vocational certificate program, cosmetology school. Some students go into the military, apprenticeship opportunities. Honestly, it's endless possibilities. There's so many things that they can do after high school and after they earn a high school diploma. So start planning now. So this is a high school diploma from a student's perspective. This is Haley telling her idea of what a high school diploma means to her.
Where you get your diploma and then you can do other jobs that require the diploma, and then you can finally go on to college.
So that was Haley. So now, Katie.
Yes, so school looks different, or continuing in education would look different for the student with a disability that obtains that diploma, okay? And I'm gonna explain a little bit about what that difference is. So when they are in high school and at the conclusion earn their diploma, as Shannon just mentioned, the student is exited from special education at that point. The one exception is for our students who are eligible for the alternative pathway to a diploma and obtain their high school diploma via that route, okay? So in high school, in that educational model, the student with the IEP would experience services provided to them, okay? And under an exit from having their IEP, if they were to continue their education in a college educational model, it is a ADA, American with Disabilities Act model, and it is based upon the student being able to request accommodations and them being reasonable accommodations. So it is not a provided to, it is as asked and as deemed appropriate. So what a contrast to an individual student who under IDEA receiving special education and having an IEP where they are entitled to those services and supports. So it does look very different. And how important it is to help prepare our individual students who will be getting their diplomas at the conclusion of high school to really be able to advocate for themselves and be able to say, you know, I am requesting an accommodation, this is what I need. That's a really important thing. As far as documentation looking different within those two educational models, the school has a document called an IEP, the student, as it supports that individual student. And the services are funded publicly. If you go over to the college educational model where the student has exited from having an IEP, you will, if you would like accommodations, you'll have to show proof of your disability. And that is dependent, it can look like a couple of different things, and it's dependent on going into the particular office on that particular college system to be able to find out what that looks like and what's required for that proof. Colleges set up their own guidelines for what the documents are that are acceptable. And also with that is that after high school, you know, there's a responsibility for paying for new things, such as if you would like to have a new evaluation, that can sometimes be done, but there's a cost to that. Whereas prior to going to college and exiting special education because of earning your diploma, it is publicly, as I said, publicly funded. And then as far as the laws and the differences there, you know, you are a student with an IEP in high school is eligible for their services in their IEP and is protected under IDEA. However, when we go in contrast, it's all under ADA and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. So quite different, but important to know.
All right, so here's a visual showing what is offered to students while they are enrolled in high school and how it changes after they graduate with a diploma. Pretty much, they must now apply and be found eligible for services that they once received in high school. So as in high school, it was just automatically given to them. It was embedded in their IEP. They received it, didn't have to ask for it. After high school, it's completely different. Students must apply and be found eligible for services from individual programs as an adult. So how can families help in this process? One thing is to research, visit community colleges and employment training programs. Students also attending their IEPs. This is very important. We said this, I think 3, maybe 4 times throughout this throughout this meeting. It's important for students to attend their IEP meetings. Also, you want to talk to your students on an ongoing basis about their future. What do they want to do? So help them start thinking past today. Where do they want to be at the end of the school year? Where do they want to be at the end of high school? What do they want to do after high school? I meet with students, seniors on a daily basis, and that are going to be graduating in 2 months and don't know what they're going to be doing after graduation. This should be being talked about way before 2 months prior to their graduation. So start encouraging that conversation. Also, another thing is encouraging to talk to students about volunteering for part-time work or seasonal employment. Have them start working on getting their resumes, practicing applications. There is a job right now that has posted on EdJoin. It's called Summer Fun, and it's an instructional aid, teacher's aid. This is the prerequisite. All you have to have is 1 year of high school. So that means if you are a freshman, you made it through the first year, you can apply for this job. They need lots and lots of aids. This is a perfect opportunity for students to gain that work experience. That's just one example. There's a lot of other examples too. And then be part of implementing the ITP. So yes, the students and the IEP team create this ITP, but parents, you could do stuff too. If a student has a goal of getting a part-time job, start helping them by creating chores at home, or help them look for jobs. It doesn't have to all be school or all be home. It's collaboration together. It's a beautiful thing when the school and home collaborates together to complete those goals. And we have questions again, Leanne.
Sorry, yes. Okay. So here's one. How hard is it for a student to get off of an IEP?
What age?
Right. I was wondering that too, Dominique, and I'm not sure if she's still on, but I mean, obviously a parent always has a right to decline services.
Yeah, there's a revocation process in the procedural safeguards. If they decided while their student was a minor that they no longer wanted their student to have an IEP, it's a fairly prompt process, and it's outlined really specifically in the procedural safeguards. You could contact your program specialist or send an email. If you're not sure who that is, you could reach out to the site principal, and they would certainly be able to connect you and provide an email if that's something that you're interested in. We do have adult students that sometimes decide they want to go through the revocation process. If they're non-conserved, that is one of the safeguards afforded to the adult student. That it does involve receipt of something called a prior written notice, which is reviewed with them. So there are quite a few steps. Again, it's not a lengthy process by any means, but it does have protections and safeguards embedded. So there's that piece. The other piece is every 3 years at minimum, throughout the time when your student is initially evaluated and determined appropriate appropriate for an IEP, or that they meet eligibility to have an IEP. Every 3 years at minimum, that is re-evaluated. This is called an eligibility evaluation. And so that would be an opportunity. Parents' input is always a component of that. There are rating scales that are sent home, and all sorts of different ways that the parent provides information. In fact, sometimes I think, oh my goodness, we have had 6 or 7 different specialists reach out to this parent as part of this evaluation process. And thank goodness for patience and grace, because that is an awful lot of conversations and answering questions. But again, the purpose is good. It's about to it's about obtaining information about your student and their strengths and what you see at home, which sometimes is very different than what is observed in the school setting. But that is the reevaluation process. And then it's a great question. There are times when students no longer meet eligibility for an IEP. So they may have an IEP, and then here we are at the point of the reevaluation process, at the eligibility evaluation. All the reports are being reviewed, all the information is synthesized, and the team discusses, the multiple prongs of eligibility. And sometimes the student no longer meets eligibility. So I hope I've covered, covered things.
You did, and it is complicated, and I know sometimes families ask that, especially at a younger age too, like, well, are they always going to need special education, right? And just like you mentioned, that is those safeguards that the district and all LEAs, school districts are held responsible to, is to make sure that that child is in the least restrictive environment, right? That we're not, giving them more services than they actually require, because they are entitled to be with their general ed peers as much as, they're able to be. So good question. Okay, does ATP offer a summer program?
Ooh, I love that question. So we have at the Adult Transition Program, which is a part of special education, and on an annual basis, the determination of whether or not an individual student with an IEP requires something called extended school year. That's based on very specific criteria and an analysis of data. So that is conducted, and a determination in your student's IEP is made as to whether or not they require an extension of their school year. So for our students that are attending ATP that are adults, that same analysis happens for extended school year. And so I'd like to think of that as an example of a summer program, if you will, for eligible students that have that service. Otherwise, that would be the only one that would be offered at ATP for eligible students.
Okay.
But there are always some great, sorry, Leanne, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay. Sure.
There are always some really cool summer programs that some of our outside agencies, they put on. Oh my gosh, there was one, not last year, but the year before, that ARC sent out, ARC, amazing, a really cool summer type of program. And there's a lot out there. So
Project Search sends a good one out too.
that's right.
Well, and that's where, again, back to that conversation of when you shared that, during school age, 3 to 18, regional centers really just in the background, right? They're the payer of last resort. They, it really was meant to be that school districts are providing a lot of the services, right? That kiddos might need. But then, like you said, after 18, regional center really starts to come in the picture. And that is a great conversation too, to have with your service coordinator about, what summer programs are available, and, those recreational activities. Yeah, service coordinators are a great resource for that.
That's a great idea.
So if your child gets a diploma through the new pathway, that alternate pathway, will they continue with Clovis Unified or with their school district?
Great question. Students who are determined eligible through their IEP team to participate in the alternate pathway to a diploma, and are able to obtain that diploma, which is a high school diploma, they are actually eligible to receive services 18 to 22. So the alternate pathway to a diploma is a new law And we have not yet had that first group that has been part of the alternative pathway to a diploma at that point of them, you know, ending their 4-year high school program to see this in action. But give it a couple more years and we sure will. So that is,
Sure.
we kept on trying to put exception, because that certainly is an exception, and for good reason.
Yes. Is DOR only involved with individuals who don't obtain diplomas?
No, that is for anyone with a qualifying disability. If they have a diploma or not, it doesn't matter. They don't even look at that. However, they can use an IEP as a determination for their disability. So you do have to show proof that you have a disability, and an IEP or a 504 are both acceptable with Department of Rehab to show that they have a disability, but you do not have to, you have it, you go to college. You know, in fact, they support that. They want to help those students. I have students right now that are getting aid from Department of Rehab for their supplies for college that support their long-term employment goal.
Great. Yeah, DOR has great services for individuals with disabilities. So, okay, we've got 2 more questions and then we're, I think we're going to be at our time limit. But can students take their 504 with them? And that's a common question I hear a lot too is, well, should my student get a 504 before we exit, before their IEP ends?
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if your student has an IEP, you can't concurrently have also a 504 with that IEP. So in
So
that
that's the-
one
right.
particular scenario, yeah, that wouldn't be.
Right. Thank you. And then,
Absolutely.
but I guess the second part of that question, the question I'm reading is if they have a 504, so that's obviously, you know, the plan they have, then does that continue with them to
No.
college?
No.
So there are elements of the 504 plan that do, but the 504 plan as it is known in K-12 in its entirety, no.
Okay.
But components like what accommodations were successful and helpful, the information as to how the student, you know, met eligibility to have a 504 plan, those things, absolutely.
Sure. Okay.
Those things transcend.
So last question, if a student is allowed to attend ESY in ATP, could the student still attend once they turn 22? And I think you touched on a little bit already about that, the difference with ESY, but if you want to tackle that one.
Yes. So if a student is eligible to have extended school year services on their IEP and they are already a student at the Adult Transition Program, extended school year would be at the Adult Transition Program. But I feel like this question might be leading to the fact that once they reach 22, whether or not they would be eligible to receive extended school year services if they were eligible that particular year. And what that is alluding to is something that is reaching maximum age and what the birth date of your student is. It depends on when it is that they reach age 22. And the law is very clear as far as within what months, if the student turns 22, when would they reach that maximum age and no longer, and no longer have an IEP or be able to be supported through the public school system. So it depends on when the birthday is. And it depends on if they're eligible for ESY. Those 2 things is what would make that, that answer. So if this is your current situation, very simple to get the answer that you need. Call the case manager or email the case manager and just ask them, hey, I either don't remember if my student was eligible for ESY, or encourage your student if they have some verbal skills to do it for themselves. Hey, am I eligible for ESY this year? And then the teacher will be able to say that. You also could just look in the IEP itself. There is a section on the ITP about an age out date, and that's important. You can also bring it up in the IEP meeting, but it will say whether or not your student was deemed eligible for extended school year based on a gathering of data and then an analysis of that data.
So just to maybe simplify,
Yes.
if anyone else is wondering that too, so do services end though when they turn 22? Like, is that
No.
even if they're mid-year, do they end?
It depends on when they turn 22.
Okay.
We have, if your birthday is like in late summer, when you turn 22 and school starts, in August, that's, I think, the tightest turnaround where you can't enroll that next school year. But we have students that are already 22 and they will not age out until June 7th, which is the last day of school. However, for that same group of students, if any of them are eligible for extended school year, they technically will not reach that maximum age until the conclusion of that individual student's extended school year.
Oh, Katie,
It depends on when your birthday falls. It's interesting.
I love how well you explain that, because obviously it's as clear as mud, right? I mean, there's always a in this scenario, and that's what's so hard, right? It's so hard for families. And you know what I see all the time too is misinformation that gets shared, especially on social media, and I just, it's so hard because you read it and you think, oh, well, then it must be true. I read it online, right? I mean, it couldn't possibly be wrong on Facebook. But it's so confusing and so, can be very overwhelming for families. And so I sincerely appreciate the two of you taking your time tonight to just help us crack open a little bit into this topic, right? This very big and cumbersome topic.
Absolutely. Happy to help with any questions that may not have been answered. But I would absolutely encourage, and Leanne, you said it best, like this can feel isolating, and you have a whole team of folks that are on your students' team with you.
Sure.
And sometimes, it may not feel that way for whatever reason, but I would strongly suggest just starting with that point person, that case manager, and or scheduling an IEP, which is something, as a parent, you have the right to request. Also, your adult student who might be the educational rights holder has the right to request.
Absolutely.
We can always get together and talk about those types of concerns.
Absolutely.
Whatever they are.
And so please don't feel like you're alone. The Family Resource Center is here as well to help you navigate this. And so with that being said, all three of our contacts information will be in that Google Drive. You will see that tomorrow with all the handouts. And don't forget to please take a moment to fill out the survey when this meeting ends. Again, your feedback is important to me.
Leanne, we do have a success story
yes.
video. Is that possible?
Of course it is, sure. You know what, I wanted to wrap up, so if there was someone who needs to log off, you're welcome to do that, but I am more than game to hang out longer, and we'll just keep on rolling for those.
Minutes.
Yeah.
It's just a couple minutes. I'm going to share. This is about a student of mine, Dalton. He was certificate of completion from high school, but ended up getting his high school diploma after the fact and went on to Wayfinders. So this is his story and of his journey.
Okay.
Oh, whoops. Yeah, there we go.
Hi, I am Dalton Maines. I am 21 years old. I was born in Fresno, California on September 21st, 2000. And I live with my parents in Clovis, California, and I have a sister who lives in Lemoore with her husband. I have autism because I have a hard time focusing on things and not get distracted, and I also have a hard time dealing with loud noises. My interests are playing guitar, playing video games, collecting stuff such as pop figures, t-shirts, and also video games, other stuff that catches my interest.
Hey, y'all like my mask? It has like all the Marvel superheroes on it. You can see Spider-Man, there's Iron Man, Captain America, the Thing, Mr. Fantastic, the Invisible Woman, Wolverine, you name it.
So when I have free time, I go to stores and I like to shop for things. And whenever my parents aren't around to take me, sometimes I would just walk there. Yeah, I don't mind being in the community, especially with friends or other acquaintances. I also like camping, fishing, swimming, going on trips, and also going on vacations, such as the beach and amusement parks.
Hey you guys, we just got off the Millennium Falcon ride, and it was so cool. It felt like we were on an actual, it felt like we were actually in a Star Wars movie. And so, I'm about to try my very first Galaxy's Edge milk. That is delicious as heck.
And I also like going to events such as concerts and fairs, and also sports games, just whatever catches my interest. I also like to cook. I also sort my own laundry, and I take the bus whenever I need to go to school. My goals are to get my high school diploma and my driver's license and live on my own in an apartment whenever I'm done. And I would also like to get a permanent job, which is why I would love to come to Wayfinders. Thank you.
So just to give you an update on that, whoops, sorry. He got accepted to the Wayfinders, and he is currently attending that program. He lives in the Palazzo Apartments with 3 other roommates, and he has a part-time permanent job. So he's reached a lot of those goals, and just to see him from when he came from high school till now, he still comes and visits us at least twice a year. And it's just great because we get a little update, but we're real proud of him, and he's doing really good.
Okay, I feel like I want to be friends with Dalton because he has a better social life than I do.
We all do.
Right? Like, way to go, Dalton. Oh my goodness. Yeah, he's way cooler than me. Oh, well, thank you. That was well worth the extra few minutes.
Well, thank you so much for everyone for joining tonight. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
you taking the time out of your evening to learn a little bit more about your students.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Well, have a wonderful evening. Thank you again, Shannon and Katie. I so appreciate you both. And have a wonderful evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.